Hello, folks. Colin here, host of the Gallant Few Rangers podcast, and I hope you're all well. I hope you're doing half as good as me because I'm delighted to be joined on a very special episode of the Gallant Few. We're going to talk about Torry, the life of Torry Gillick, a football great, and I'm privileged to have the co-authors on David Herd and Ian Stewart. First of all, welcome back, friend of the pod, David Herd. You're quite a regular on the Gallant Few.
Yeah, it's good to be back again. Familiar faces, face for radio. I've always felt I've got, but never mind. I'll try my best to look photogenic for you. Yeah, it's great to be back, and looking forward to a wee chat.
And we're also joined, I believe this is a Gallant Few debut for Ian Stewart, another, like when we talk about the kind of Rangers folklore, you're up there with the likes of Davy and like several others who've really kept the Rangers history alive. What you're about to see, it's absolutely a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, thanks very much, Colin. I'm delighted to be here and to talk about Torry. And as probably will come on to during the podcast, this is a period in Rangers history which really fascinates me. And I think we need to keep the history alive, so to speak. So that's what we're trying to do. So thanks, Colin.
I'll maybe fire my first question to you then, Ian, because I've picked Davy's brains about certain eras in Rangers history, and I'm fascinated with pretty much anything before I can remember, because there's so much great history in the club, and I find it very hard to narrow down what you research on. Like, I don't know, I find myself time and time again on Wikipedia rabbit holes, just like clicking link after link, reading up and stuff. We can't really talk about any player without the context behind the team behind it. Do you have a particular interest in the late 40s, the Bill Stooth era?
Yeah, so Bill Struth was. I've written a book about Helicopter Sunday. That was just a toe in the water, and it was supporters' tales. There wasn't a lot of writing in it, to be honest. But there was a weekend where it was either 442 magazine or the Sunday Times had an article on the 50 greatest British managers, and Bill Struth wasn't among them. So that to me seemed ludicrous, knowing what we know, probably all three of us know. So that set me off and set me on the journey, probably. Journey's a really cheesy word, isn't it? But the journey to write, in conjunction with David Mason, the Bill Struth story, that Bill Struth, the boss. Now, I found that fascinating, and probably more so the personal aspects and family aspects as opposed to the football, or along with the football, but it was stuff that folk didn't know. In fact, his granddaughter, there was things that David and I discovered that his granddaughter didn't know about him. And then during that, after I did that, I moved to a wee village called Glenboig, just outside Coatbridge. And I was thinking, what's my next book going to be? To find out that Tiger Shaw used to live 5 minutes walk from my front door. And his granddaughter actually works for the same organisation I do. So that seemed a bit of fate. So Tiger was to be my next project. And again, it was covering that same period. And a lot of the social history in North Lanarkshire I covered in that as well, because it was really, really interesting. Too tiny, and there's a small village called Annet Hill. There can't be more than, I don't know, a few hundred folk live there now. At one time there were 1,500, but three of the residents of Annet Hill played for Scotland against England in the 1946 Victory International. Tiger being one of them. And that, there was all these facts emerged, which were really, really fascinating. And then the next progression for me was, during writing about the Bill Struth book and then writing about Tiger Shaw, Tor Gillick kept coming up. His name kept coming up. The fact that Bill Struth had signed him twice as well was particularly interesting, but his character and the type of character he was seemed a bit at odds with Mr. Struth. But clearly Mr. Struth thought very, very highly of him. He would never have signed him twice if he didn't. So it's knitting all that together, Colin, I think it becomes really interesting. And then when you add in the family aspects, the social aspects, what was life like for a footballer? They weren't actually far removed from the man in the street. all makes for, well, I find it fascinating. I know David does as well. And, I think there's a lot of folk out there will find Torry's story particularly interesting, because there'll be things in there I would imagine very few folk know, and there's things in there the family weren't aware of. And it's those things, those nuggets of information that I find really, really interesting.
I love what you mean with I don't know, just moving somewhere and then seeing that, I don't know, that link to a Rangers player. I find that it's something really powerful about that. I mind just being, I don't know, being in awe. Like I've always went to the Viceroy after the games if I ever go out after the game at Ibrox, and it was maybe about 11 years after going that I found out that was Tom Valance's old pub. I mean, I think I was the only person in the bar that night. I didn't know. It's now when I tell people, everybody seems to know, but I don't know. You're kind of there's something powerful about just having that like common connection out with loving Rangers. Davey, I'll get your thoughts on it. That was going to be one of my first questions that Ian's kind of touched on. How do you narrow down which player you're going to write about? Because we're spoiled for choice at Rangers, aren't we?
Yeah, well, I think Ian's alluded to the fact that Tor Gillick's name keeps coming up when you research that period of Rangers history, so the 30s to 40s. His name keeps appearing in it for various reasons, on and off the pitch. I suppose my initial involvement in it came a little bit by accident. Slightly name dropping here, but Ian and I do the occasional little videos for Rangers TV, the club TV channel. Ian Sands there has started doing some great films in Rangers history, and he gets authors like us to come along and speak in them. And we made one that was going to be about the Iron Curtain team of the late 40s. And I happened to talk about Tor Gillick's contribution to Rangers in that. And then the Gillick family visited Ibrox. They got a tour, they got a VIP tour and all that kind of good stuff. And Rangers TV made a film of it. And they put me in it, speaking about Tor Gillick. I hadn't met the family at this point. The family then contacted Ian Sands to say, can we talk to this David Herd guy? He seems to know an awful lot about my papa. Because she was desperate to know more about his career. So we got in touch with each other. And the more I got to know them, the more they told me about some of the family stuff that I didn't know anything about, I'm thinking, this would make a cracking story. This would make a great book. So I kind of fell into it a little bit. And then Ian and I sort of hooked up because we found out through our Facebook page that we're both in, that both of us were actually starting to research a Tor Gillick book. We had decided he was going to be our next person to write a book about. And when we found that out, we said, well, why don't we do it together? Because you'll find out things that I don't, I'll find out things that you don't. Why don't we do it together? Then it all goes into one book, and it'll be the best we can make it. So we done the book together, and we're really happy with it actually. And what's made even better is the family are happy with it, and that's the best vote of confidence you can get.
David, that must be like speaking about the books that you've done before. We've had you on here, like plenty of late nights, early mornings, plenty of like diving through the archives. This must be something really different. This must be a really different way of how you go and try and like get a full circle of a character here. Like you're going and but it's not just how many goals, how many games, how many trophies they won. That's we'll say like a true Rangers great, isn't it? Just what they do on the field. It's the mark of the man off the field as well. But that I can't help but think that must be some amount of pressure knowing that his family have invested so much in it as well. I don't know. I'd be bricking it.
No, well, I don't think you can really do a biography of anybody unless you find out as much as you can about their life, not just their professional life, but their family life, their personal life. And the best way to do that is actually, because he lived quite a long time ago, there isn't anyone left that played against him that we could talk to. There isn't anybody that knew him particularly well left, apart from his daughter, his remaining daughter, and his sons. His grandkids remember him a little bit, but he died quite young, and his grandkids were all still quite young when he passed away. So it's really the daughter who has been the source of most of the older stuff. But we actually found out lots of stuff going through old newspaper archives, etc., that she didn't know. So I'll give one. So one example is that he was involved in a car accident the night he signed for Everton, and his daughter didn't know that. That was before she was born. So why would she know that? So there's it's good fun researching these things. You find out all kinds of stuff, and as you say, it does take you down rabbit holes, and at the same time, it gives you a look at what life was like back then. Ian's kind of alluded to it there. Football players are nothing like, they had nothing like the lifestyle that they've got now. I mean, Torry Gillick he had about 3 or 4 different jobs when he finished playing football, because he didn't have any money, basically. He didn't save anything as a football player. So he then had to go out and have a whole new career after that.
I think, Ian, I mentioned at the start, the context, the players and their lives. I do think it's really important to remember that, like, behind the goals and the games and the trophies they won, there is a completely different lifestyle. These players didn't have the luxury that today's players have. They didn't retire in their mid-30s and never have to work again in their life as well. And I find that all the more fascinating as well. And I think Tor Gillick is definitely a great example of that.
Yeah, it is, and they didn't have the riches. Though I think it's, to talk about another Rangers great, Ralph Brand. I think Ralph Brand once said, while they weren't that far, and this was while I was doing the Tiger Shaw book, they weren't that far removed in some respects from the man in the street, but they still felt well off. And that would be the same for Torry as well, I'm sure, compared to going down the pit, which was North Lanarkshire, would have been your fate. Being a football player was a far better alternative to that, for sure. And I think there was a work ethic with a lot of these players as well. It wouldn't have crossed their mind, "Oh, finished playing football, so I'm not going to work again." Well, they had to work through necessity, but I think a lot of them would have, even if they had been rewarded relatively comparatively today, a lot of them would have carried on working, because that was the kind of standards, that was the ethos, that was what was drilled into them about being a Rangers. Talk about Rangers specifically here. A Rangers player, Mr. Struth would have drilled that into them. Nothing but the best will do. It's like the bowler hat thing, and wearing and turning up for training, collar and tie, which I must admit, maybe I'm an old fuddy-duddy, but I still think the players should be turning up in collar and tie and not trackies. That's a personal preference. That's what sets Rangers apart, and that's what set Rangers apart back then, to the standards that the players were to adhere to. And I know Torry would carry his bowler hat in a paper bag and only put it on when he came within sight of Mr. Struth's flat in Copeland Road. But those things are what makes Rangers different, and what makes us unique.
Just stepping away from Rangers for a wee minute, I'll stick with you, Ian. What's really fascinating about Torry Gillick is he's a Hall of Fame member for Rangers, but Everton as well. How much of the book is touching on his Everton career as well, because that's some achievement to be a Hall of Famer for 2 huge British clubs.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a fair wee bit about his Everton career, and thanks to Rob Sawyer, particularly, who got us provided a lot of information, or access to information, such as the old Everton minute books, and it really, really fascinating going through them. And that's by by goodness, that's a rabbit hole you can go down if you want to go through all the old minute books. And you say, oh, and he played with the likes of Tommy Lawton and Dixie Dean as well, Torry. But he was revered in Merseyside. He moved there as a 19-year-old, as a, sort of the next shining star from Scotland. Joined partway through the season, had a very good first season, got a bad injury the second, a full season, and in the third full season, Everton won the league title, the top division in England, and they've only won it 9 times. So that just shows you what an achievement that was. And only yesterday, actually, I got a copy of Rob Sawyer's book that he wrote about that Everton team. And that shows you the steam in which they're held. There's actually a book dedicated to that period in Everton's history. And Torry was an integral part of that, absolutely integral. Though, in saying all that, fate took a hand a little bit, I think, with obviously the war came along, and then he had a really bad accident in a fire in his garage, which he was out for a fair length of time. But during that period, him and his wife made the decision to return to Scotland to complete his rehab, really, with among more friendly faces, though they were very well settled in Merseyside. But of course, the draw to come home probably at that time, plus with the war going on, was all the greater. And that's where fate took its hand and essentially led him back to Rangers. And thank goodness for that, for our sake.
Am I right in saying that was that reported to be a record fee for Everton at the time to take Tor Gillick down, or was that just speculation?
It was, but it's not what the minute books say. Now, David and I had a bit of a debate. Why would that be? Why would one thing be reported in the press and something different in the minute books? So you could speculate, and I think we've maybe put a bit of maybe it was because of in the book. But in the press, yes, it was a record deal. Though, as I've said, what's in the official record of the minutes is a bit different.
Because before I read the book, obviously I went straight on Wikipedia and I went on the Rangers heritage pages and tried to read up, and I'm like, why swap them Everton for Rangers? Obviously, I'm going to be biased, That's Rangers are bigger than Real Madrid in my eyes. Not my kid, but no, I was. But obviously, with such a fee, is a big fee anyway. Then it's I'd imagine that would have came with a decent wage too. Davey, you've kind of touched on the research, the time you spent in with the family, and you've touched on going through the rabbit hole of Everton Minute book. And I think we've touched on this conversation before in previous pods on how well our Rangers bring into life their own history, and I suppose I know the club would have been forthcoming, but how well documented is the likes of Tor Gillick in this period of time in the Rangers archives as a club, and do you see this era getting more of a spotlight in the museum in the future?
Yeah, well, I think when you talk about Tor Gillick, he's kind of unique in that his first spell was the kind of Davy Meiklejohn, the Bob McPhail era, if you know what I mean. The early to mid 30s. So that was one great Rangers team then that dominated Scottish football. And then when he came back, and then the war finished, and after the Second World War, you had the great Iron Curtain team, the way Willie Woodburn and Billy Waddle, Tiger Shaw, etc. So he basically is the only one that kind of straddles those two great Rangers teams that when I'd imagine most Rangers historians would, if you're talking about who's the greatest Rangers team ever, both those eras will get mentioned in that conversation. So he was a big part of not one but two absolute Rangers dynasties that we talked about forever. If you go to the museum, there's lots of stuff in there about both those teams that he played in. But as I say, he's got this kind of unique part in it. Obviously, Ian's talking about the only man that Billstruth signed twice, so he's got two Rangers careers to talk about. He's got the one as a teenager when he was more a kind of goal scoring winger, although he was signed as a centre forward, but he was a kind of goal scoring winger in his first Rangers career, although he played all over the forward line. But his second Rangers career, he became this thinking, clever inside right and inside forward who still scored lots of goals, but he was really renowned for how clever a footballer he was, how he sort of made things tick, and he created more than he scored. So when it comes to going to the museum or seeing Rangers history films and stuff like that, his name crops up, obviously. My personal view is that he's probably not as well known as some of the Iron Curtain team are. If you talk about the Iron Curtain team, you tend to talk about Wally Waddle, Wally Woodburn, Willie Thornton, Bobby Brown. You don't hear Gillick's name as much as them. And that was probably another reason right at the start of this that I thought, this is a name that I think people need a little bit better educated in. When you look at some of his achievements, he's in the top 10 Rangers goal scorers all the time, and yet he wasn't a centre forward. If you look at the top 10 goal scorers, they're nearly all centre forward. He actually wasn't one. He scored more than 200 goals for Rangers. So he was an absolute superstar.
It's funny because when we first were in contact, you were doing this book and had it coming up. Tor Gillick's a name I know, but I'll admit my ignorance here. And I straight away I thought, right, Gillick 30s, and it didn't dawn on me that he came back. I knew he had many a year under a Rangers jersey. I didn't quite realise that he'd been away and came back. I thought it was. I would, if I was to get, if this was one of your quizzes, Davey, I would have said, all right, maybe early 30s to early 40s. He might have left during the war, but again, I'm probably a good example of backing up what you say there. Like he's another one of the many players that we just don't speak about enough. Ian, you've kind of mentioned earlier in the show about it's not just what he done on off the pitch. He's an interesting character off the pitch, and obviously we'll not go into the too much details in the book as well. But there's a few decent stories about Torry Gillick. Also, you mentioned he's maybe left a wee bit late to put his bowler hat on. There's the odd story or two about hens, and he loved his Charles as well. Like I think I really like when books like this can add a flavour of the character because it just humanises the legend of a player, doesn't it?
It adds a bit of colour, doesn't it, as well? It's the colour in what their life like off the park. And I'd said earlier on, one of the hooks for me was knowing what Mr. Struth was like and knowing what a disciplinarian he was. He appeared to be drawn to Torry Gillick. Torry Gillick was one of his favourite ever players. And in some respects, Torry Gillick was the antithesis of what a Bill Struth player would be. David said the other night, and it's true, Tiger Shaw would be a typical Bill Struth player, hard as nails, die for the jersey, never shirk a tackle. We will fight till the day is done, so to speak. Torry Gillick probably was all those things as well, with a wee bit of devilment about him as well, and a wee bit of a character, to say the least. And that part of it, I think Mr. Struth would secretly have admired because he was different. You can't have 11 or however many characters and all be the same. You need a good mix. And he would have known if Bill Struth was good at anything, it was man management and picking a team. We all know he wasn't a football man in the traditional sense of it. It was athletics and fitness were his main things. But then we've also spoke about there how he built, I think probably 4 great sides. He built a team in the 30s and he built the post-war team. And how he did that was probably a wee bit the way Bob Paisley did it. And Brian Clough, you get the right players and the players run the team and the players control what's on the park. And you need a good mix. You need somebody like Torry Gillick to sprinkle that stardust and make the difference in the big games. And you wouldn't be able to do that without that underlying character and that wee bit that made him different and made him David used superstar, and that's absolutely true. He was a superstar of his day. Thanks.
Colin, can I just one wee thing that reminded me of? Molly's daughter, one of her earliest memories is George Young, Willie Waddle and Tiger Shaw coming round to the house on a Friday for them to talk tactics of how they were going to play the next day and the opposition they were playing. So, just what Ian was just talking about there. Bill Struth was many great things. One thing he wasn't was a football tactician. That's not the era he was from. That wasn't really part of being a football manager a lot of the time. The players decided on the tactics, and quite often they did it in Tor Gillick's living room.
It's surprising. I'll be honest, because I don't know. And maybe I'm doing this era a great disservice, because I would have thought they would have took the leaf out of the manager's book as well and really focus on athleticism and the power and courage. But at the same time, like I know through like conversations like these that this team could play, but it does surprise me in an era where we don't really think about the tactics. We've still got 5 strikers, or 5 forwards, I should say. That's a great memory to have. Molly's probably got the first one of the earliest memories. What now turns into video analysis, pretty much. So, David, we'll start with you. Tell the listeners when the book's coming out and where you can get it.
Yeah, well, it's released by Pitch Publications on Monday the 19th, so it's not that far away now. It's been on Amazon for pre-order for a number of weeks anyway. You can get it direct for the publisher, you can get it from Amazon. It'll be in Waterstones shops and online. It'll be in WH Smith online, I would imagine. So basically, anybody that sells sports books, you'll be able to get it. And if there's any Rangers season ticket holders sitting watching this that fancy a copy of it, I'm sure me or Ian could meet them before a game. Hampden or Ibrox, depending on when it is. We can get a hand over a book in person, sign it if they want, and they'll get it a bit cheaper that way.
Well, not to be that guy, show off listeners, I've got my copy right here. So, but gents, I think that's as good a place as any to finish up. Just to echo what David said there, the links, as always, I'll put the Amazon link in the description. I've really enjoyed the read myself, so thank you for giving me a quick glance at it, gentlemen. But listeners, link is in the description. Absolutely go on and get it pre-ordered and have a look at Davies and Ian's other works as well. Personally, I really enjoyed everything that I've read through, and even enjoy these conversations more, talking through them with the authors. Just gents, don't forget about us when you're on Rangers TV now as well. So just dip into the Gallon Few every now and then. But Ian, it's been an absolute pleasure meeting you, my friend. Any parting words to the listeners?
No, just hopefully, if you haven't read something on Rangers history going back to this era, I would not just a book, but I would strongly recommend it. There's a few books out there covering this era, and it really is fascinating. And I guess the other thing never to forget is that we are the people.
Davey, try and follow that up with a goodbye.
I can't compete with that. It's been great. You know me. I could sit and talk about Rangers history for as long as you want me to. Totally echoing what Ian's saying though. I think that this book covers a footballer and a man whose story won't be all that well known, and I think on and off the pitch, actually especially off the pitch, for anybody that reads it, is they're going to finish it and they're going to have the utmost admiration for a guy who had a lot of things to put up with in his life. He had a lot of troubles, he had a lot of tragedies to deal with, and he came through them stronger every time. And his family are proud of him. and there's a reason for that. They should be.
Yeah.
And I think you've both done the man and the family very proud with this book. So thank you both for coming on as always, and thank you to all the listeners for listening. And again, go and click the link in the description, and we'll speak to you again very soon. Take care.
Thanks, Colin.
Thanks, Colin. Thank you.